Someone asked the person you love, "Would you marry someone else?" They risked everything just to say, "No. My beloved child." Someone looked directly at the person you love and asked a question they were never supposed to answer honestly, "Would you marry someone else?" For a moment, everything around them seemed to disappear. They knew what was expected. They knew the safe answer, the answer that would keep everyone comfortable and prevent old tensions from rising again. But something inside them refused to cooperate. Because saying yes would have meant pretending that the deepest part of their heart had already moved on from you. And after everything they had hidden, everything they had tried to convince themselves was over, they could not do it anymore. Still, they hesitated. Not because they were unsure about you, but because one simple word could change everything. Someone in that room was waiting closely for their response, and that person had a reason for asking that went far deeper than curiosity. Don't skip, because what happened during those few silent seconds revealed more than the answer itself. Their eyes dropped. Their hands became still. And suddenly, memories they had spent months pushing away came rushing back. The conversations with you they replayed when nobody was watching, the moments they wished they could redo, and the things they almost told you before fear stopped them. The person asking the question noticed the hesitation and pushed harder. You have to move forward eventually. So if the right person came along, would you marry them? Now there was nowhere left to hide. Your person could have laughed it off. They could have said, "Maybe someday." Instead, they quietly said, "No." Just one word. But the room changed instantly. Someone stared at them as though they had just admitted something impossible. Another person asked why they would reject a future they had not even seen yet. That was when your person finally lifted their head. Their answer wasn't dramatic. It was almost painfully calm. Because it wouldn't be fair to marry someone while my heart is somewhere else. And although they never spoke your name, everyone who knew the history understood exactly where that heart still was. But here is where the story becomes more complicated. That "no" cost them something. The question had not been random at all. There was already another possibility being discussed behind the scenes, someone considered stable, acceptable, and easier than the unfinished story between you two. Your person knew that refusing could disappoint people whose approval mattered deeply to them. They knew it might reopen questions they had avoided answering for a long time. Yet they chose the difficult truth anyway. Stay till the end, because this was not simply about refusing to marry somebody else. It was about finally refusing to build an entire life around a lie. And later, when your person was alone, they apparently faced the question they had been avoiding all along. If they were willing to risk so much just to say no to someone else, what were they finally willing to risk to say yes to you? That is when they made a decision nobody in that room saw coming, and one detail about what they planned to do next could change the meaning of everything. What they decided next was something they had been afraid to do for a very long time. After leaving that conversation, the person you love didn't immediately call anyone or try to explain their answer. They needed silence. Because saying no out loud had forced them to confront a truth they could no longer hide from themselves. They had spent so much time trying to appear unaffected, telling people they were fine, convincing themselves that whatever existed between you had become part of the past. But now those excuses sounded empty. And then something unexpected happened. The same person who had asked about marriage followed them and quietly said, "You answered that too quickly for someone who claims they've moved on." Your person froze. They realized their secret wasn't nearly as hidden as they thought. But instead of denying it again, they asked one question: what if the person I actually wanted believes I stopped caring? The answer they received changed the entire direction of the conversation. The person standing beside them didn't offer comfort. Instead, they said something harder: "Then maybe you gave them every reason to believe that." Those words landed deeply because your person knew there was truth inside them. They remembered the distance they created, the conversations they avoided, the moments when pride made them stay silent even though every part of them wanted to reach toward you. And suddenly, the biggest obstacle wasn't another potential marriage. It wasn't family expectations or what other people might think. It was the possibility that they had waited so long that you had finally learned how to live without them. Don't skip, because this is where their fear began turning into action. They pulled out their phone and opened something connected to you, something they had apparently looked at more times than they would ever admit. Their finger hovered there for several seconds. They almost backed away again. Then they noticed one small detail that made them wonder whether the door between you had truly closed at all. That detail gave them enough courage to begin writing a message. Not a casual, "How are you?" Not some meaningless excuse designed to test whether you would respond. They started writing what they had actually been afraid to say: that refusing someone else wasn't about being stubborn or refusing happiness. It was because they couldn't promise their future to another person while carrying unresolved feelings for you. But halfway through, they stopped. Something about sending those words through a screen suddenly felt wrong. Too easy. Too distant. After risking everything by telling the truth in that room, hiding behind a message felt like another form of fear. So they erased most of what they had written and made a different decision. They wanted you to hear the truth directly, without anyone interpreting it for them. And that decision became even more serious when they learned that someone else had already tried to reach you first, someone who knew exactly what had happened when your person said no. The moment they discovered someone else might reach you first, everything became urgent. Your person suddenly realized they were no longer controlling the story. Someone from that conversation knew why they had said no, knew how deeply your name still lived beneath their silence, and might tell you before they had the courage to explain it themselves. That possibility terrified them for one reason: you might hear only half the truth. You might think they rejected another person because they were confused, lonely, or trapped in the past. But that wasn't what they wanted you to understand. Their answer had come from something much deeper. So they tried to find out exactly what had been said to you. And that was when they learned something unexpected: the person who intended to contact you wasn't trying to expose them. They were trying to protect you from waiting for someone who still seemed too afraid to act. Those words hit your person harder than the marriage question ever had. Because suddenly they saw the situation from your side. How long could someone reasonably wait for feelings that were never clearly expressed? How many silences could you interpret before eventually deciding silence was the answer? Your person had believed keeping their emotions hidden was protecting everyone from complications. Now they understood that silence could create its own kind of pain. Stay till the end, because this realization pushed them toward a choice they had avoided for far too long. They went back through old memories, not to romanticize what happened, but to understand where everything changed. And one particular moment kept returning to them. It was something you once said during a conversation they had pretended not to take seriously. At the time, they gave you almost no reaction. But privately, those words stayed with them, because you had unknowingly described exactly what they were doing, choosing fear over honesty. That memory changed what they planned to say to you. They no longer wanted to arrive with dramatic promises or ask you to forget everything that had happened. They understood they had no right to demand an immediate answer from you. Instead, they wanted to tell you one clean truth: when they were offered the possibility of moving forward with someone else, their heart refused before their mind could create another excuse. But there was still one problem. Before they could speak to you, they needed to confront the people who had been encouraging that other future. And this time, there would be no vague answers. No, maybe later. No pretending they simply weren't ready for marriage. They were preparing to explain why they had said no, but when they returned to face everyone, one person was waiting with a question even more difficult than the first. If you're still choosing them in your heart, why haven't you chosen them in your life? That question left them with nowhere to hide. If you're still choosing them in your heart, why haven't you chosen them in your life? Your person had prepared explanations for almost everything else, but not that. For several seconds, they said nothing. Then the truth finally surfaced. They had been afraid that choosing you openly would mean risking rejection, admitting past mistakes, and facing the possibility that you might no longer want what they still wanted. Saying no to someone else had been difficult, but approaching you was somehow even harder. Because another person's disappointment could eventually fade. Your rejection would strike the one place they had protected for so long. Then someone in the room said something they couldn't ignore: "You're already risking losing them by doing nothing." That sentence changed their expression immediately. For the first time, they understood that waiting was not the safe choice they had imagined. Waiting was a decision too, and it could cost them you. That was when they stopped defending themselves. Instead, they admitted something nobody expected. There had been more than one moment when they almost reached out to you. Once, they had even prepared exactly what they wanted to say, only to erase it because they convinced themselves the timing was wrong. Another time, they nearly asked someone close to you whether you still thought about them, but pride stopped them. Each time, fear disguised itself as patience. And each time, another opportunity disappeared. Don't skip, because the person who had originally asked the marriage question suddenly revealed why they had pushed so hard. They had noticed something your person believed nobody could see. Whenever another future was mentioned, your person became distant. Whenever marriage came up, they avoided giving a direct answer. But whenever someone casually mentioned you, something changed, their attention sharpened, their silence became heavier, and they listened for every detail. The question had been a test. And that single word, no, had confirmed what everyone was beginning to suspect. But instead of embarrassing them, this revelation gave your person an unexpected kind of freedom. Their secret was already visible. There was no point pretending anymore. So they finally said the sentence they had avoided for months: "I still care about them, and I need to know whether there's anything left for us." Nobody interrupted. Nobody tried to convince them otherwise. The room that had once felt like pressure suddenly became completely quiet. Your person picked up their phone again, but this time they didn't begin typing a long confession. They realized the next step needed to be simple and real. They wanted a conversation where you could ask anything and where they could no longer disappear behind silence. Something huge is waiting for you, because just before they were ready to reach out, someone told them one final piece of information about you. Something that made them wonder whether you had been waiting for the same conversation all along. The information they heard about you was small enough to sound ordinary, but to your person, it changed everything. Someone quietly told them that your distance had never necessarily meant indifference. There had been a moment when you apparently asked about them. Not dramatically, not desperately, but with the kind of careful curiosity people use when they still care and don't want anyone to notice. Your person immediately wanted every detail. What exactly had you asked? When had you asked it? What expression had been on your face? Suddenly, the possibility they had been too frightened to believe became impossible to ignore. Maybe you had not completely closed the door. But the person sharing this information warned them not to misunderstand it. Caring about someone does not automatically mean trusting them again. Missing someone does not erase unanswered questions. And if your person wanted another chance, they would have to approach you with honesty rather than assumptions. That warning changed their entire plan. They stopped thinking about how to persuade you and started thinking about what you deserved to know. They needed to explain why they had stayed silent. Why they had allowed other people to believe they were ready to consider someone else. And most importantly, why that marriage question had finally broken through every excuse they had built. Stay till the end, because this is where their answer became much bigger than one word. They realized they hadn't said no because they expected you to immediately take them back. They said it because marrying someone else while secretly carrying feelings for you would have been unfair to everyone involved. For once, they chose truth without knowing whether truth would reward them. And strangely, that gave them courage. They no longer needed certainty that you would say yes. They only needed enough courage to finally let you decide after hearing the full story. So they made one final choice before reaching you. They would not hide the consequences of what they had done. They would tell you that saying no had disappointed people, closed a door that might never reopen, and forced them to admit publicly what they had barely admitted privately. But they would also make something clear: they were not placing that sacrifice on your shoulders. You owed them nothing because of it. That distinction mattered. They wanted you to know they had chosen honesty because it was right, not because they expected you to repay them with love. Then, just as they prepared to contact you, the person who had challenged them earlier asked one last question: and if they tell you it's too late? Your person became completely still. Their response surprised everyone, because instead of retreating into fear again, they said something that revealed exactly how much they had changed. And what they were finally prepared to do if your answer was not the one they hoped for. Their answer came without the hesitation everyone expected. Then I'll respect it. No bargaining. No dramatic promises. No attempt to make you responsible for the choices they had made. Your person finally understood something that fear had kept hidden from them. Loving you honestly also meant giving you the freedom to choose what was right for you. If you said it was too late, they knew it would hurt deeply. But they would rather live with an honest answer than spend another year wondering what might have happened if they had found the courage to speak. That realization changed their entire energy. For months, they had been trying to control every possible outcome before taking a single step. Now they were prepared to step forward without knowing what waited on the other side. And there was something else they admitted quietly. Even if you rejected them, they still would not regret saying no to marrying someone else. Because for once, they had refused to use another person as an escape from feelings they had never resolved. Then came the moment they could no longer postpone. Your person moved away from everyone, found somewhere quiet, and looked at your name on their phone. This time, they didn't rehearse 20 different versions of the conversation. They didn't ask anyone what they should say. They simply stared at the screen while remembering the question that started everything: would you marry someone else? A question that should have been simple had exposed an entire hidden truth. Don't skip, because what happened next was not the grand confession everyone expected. Your person decided the first thing you needed wasn't a declaration. It was honesty. They wanted to begin by acknowledging the silence between you and their responsibility for creating part of it. They wanted to ask whether you would be willing to hear something they should have told you much sooner. And just before reaching out, they whispered a sentence to themselves that nobody else was meant to hear: whatever happens now, I'm done pretending. But there was still one truth they had not revealed, not even to the people who now knew how they felt about you. Saying no had not been their first act of choosing you. Long before that question was asked, your person had quietly turned away from another opportunity because something about moving forward without resolving things with you felt wrong. They had told everyone the timing simply wasn't right, but that wasn't the complete reason. The complete reason was you. And now they realized that if they finally spoke to you, they couldn't reveal only the convenient pieces. You deserved the entire truth, including the mistakes, the fear, and the decision they had already made before anyone ever asked about marriage. So they prepared themselves for the conversation that could either reopen your story or finally close it. But before they could take that final step, one last discovery surfaced about why the marriage question had been asked in the first place. And it revealed that someone had known about their feelings for you much longer than your person ever realized.